Chapter 45 The Barn Conversations. As winter dragged on, Roz spent more of her time inside with the herd. There were long stretches of quiet. The cows chewed their hay. The robot tapped the farm computer. The wind gently rattled the windows. And then someone would start talking, and someone else would chime in, and the quiet of the barn would gradually be overtaken by conversations like these. I am so bored. Tess was staring at the floor. I can't wait until spring when I can wander through tall grass and feel warm sunlight on my back. I just hope I don't die of boredom first. Old Annabelle snorted. You young cows are spoiled rotten, she said. Your lives are so easy and you still find things to complain about. Tess rolled her eyes. Yeah, we should be grateful for what we've got. You've told us this before. Yeah, well, you should be grateful for what you've got, said Annabelle. I've lived on other farms, and trust me, you have nothing to complain about. Tess couldn't help being curious, and then she said, Well, what were those other farms like? Oh, I'd rather not discuss them, said Annabelle in a low voice. You see, I witnessed some terrible things on those farms. It was a blessing when I was moved here, but I often think about the animals I left behind, and I hope they're okay. The old cow sank into thought for a minute. I know life here isn't perfect, she said at last, but we have so much to be grateful for. We have our lovely herd, we have this beautiful barn, and we have Roz, added Tess. And we have Roz. Annabelle turned and smiled at the robot in the corner. Roz listens to us and treats us with love and kindness, and she makes our lives as comfortable as she possibly can. We will certainly miss her when she's gone. Roz, why do humans need so much cow's milk? Said Lily as the other calves crowded around her. It was a question that they'd all been wondering about. Well, there are billions of humans in the world, explained Roz, and many of them drink milk and combine it with different ingredients to make different foods. What kind of foods? Said another calf. Butter and cheese and yogurt are all made with milk, said Roz. Many desserts are also made with milk. What's a dessert? Said someone else. A dessert is a sweet food eaten at the end of a meal. Popular desserts include cake and custard and ice cream. That answer only raised more questions. What's cake? What's custard? What's ice cream? Now, Roz tried her best to explain these foods to the calves, but it wasn't easy. After all, the robot couldn't even perform the simple act of eating. How could she possibly describe the flavors and sensations of tasting delicious desserts? Lily interrupted. Well, just tell me this, Roz. When we're older, will our milk be used to make desserts? Yes, said the robot. The calves smiled, and they trotted away, happy in the knowledge that someday they'd help to bring sweet and delicious things into the world. It is almost spring, said Roz to the herd. It is almost time for me to run away back home to the wilderness. I am sorry that I must leave, but you will all be well cared for when I am gone, I promise. The cows began mooing from their stalls. Don't worry about us, Roz. There's no need to apologize. We understand why you're running away. Lily poked her head through the railings of her stall and said, I could never run away into the wilderness. I would be too frightened. I'd love to roam through the wilderness, said Tess. That sounds exciting. No wilderness for me, thank you very much, said Annabelle. I just want a quiet, cozy life. I have plenty to fear in the wilderness, said Roz. However, I have more to fear here. I can never be my true self around humans, and so I must try to return to my home. I only wish I could do it by myself, she went on. But I need help. I could never escape from the farm without the children, and I could never find my way home without my son. I feel bad for asking so much of them. Don't feel bad, said Lily. Brightville and the children want to help you. They love you. We all do. The farm won't feel the same without you, Roz, but we know you're doing the right thing. The herd agreed with Lily, and throughout the barn, cows quietly nodded their heads. Chapter 46 The Spring. With each passing day, the sun climbed a little higher, and its rays grew a little warmer. The last patches of snow melted away and color returned to the land. The pasture, the fields, the trees, they were all turning bright green, and the air slowly filled with the fresh smells of spring. Many of the cows had been steadily growing bigger, and now calving season had arrived. When the time was right, each cow went out to the pasture so her calf could be born in soft grass. The robot stood nearby just in case anyone needed her help, but nobody ever did. Even the first time mothers knew what to do instinctively. And soon newborn calves were frolicking around the farm. Spring was a happy, exciting time, and yet Roz was distracted. More and more she found herself looking to the skies, hoping to see Bright Bill and his flock, because she knew they were on their way. Chapter 47, The Dinner. Mr. Sharif hopped out of the truck with his arms full of shopping bags. He limped toward the farmhouse, dragging his leg in the usual way, and then he fell. Roz ran over and found the man sprawled on the driveway, groceries scattered around him. Are you okay?" she said, pulling him to his feet. "I'm fine," he grumbled. Roz started picking up the groceries and said, "Let me help you inside." A minute later, the two of them were stepping into the house, and jackets and hats hung from pegs on the wall, shoes were lined up beneath the bench, and a man peeled off his boots and hollered, "Kids, it's time to cook dinner." Footsteps pounded across the ceiling, and the children came flying down the staircase with their dog. "Is Roz having dinner with us?" said Jaya. "Roz doesn't eat," said Jad. "Well, I know, but she could sit with us." "Well, how about it, Roz?" said Mr. Sharif. "Would you care to join us for dinner?" The robot stared at the family. The family stared at the robot. "What would you like me to do?" said Roz. In a very proper voice, Jad said, "I would greatly enjoy the pleasure of your company for dinner." In a very improper voice, Jaya said, "I order you to stay for dinner." The children didn't wait for a response. They just snatched the groceries from Roz and scampered off. Oscar ran after them, barking, "Is that food? It smells like food. I want food." The wood floor creaked as Roz followed Mr. Sharif through the living room. A comfy chair and a sofa faced the darkened electronic screen, and above the fireplace hung a painting of a familiar old barn. Doorways led to other rooms. Roz glanced into Mr. Sharif's office and saw a portrait of his family, including his wife. Mrs. Sharif was pretty, with dark curly hair and a bright smile. It was the same smile that Roz saw on the children. "Look, Jaya's crying like a baby," came Jad's giggly voice from the children. And when Roz walked in, the girl was chopping an onion with tears running down her cheeks. "Roz, I order you to chop this onion for me," said Jaya, wiping her eyes. And so the robot picked up a knife, and in a flash the onion was perfectly chopped and dumped into a bowl. Clearly Roz was designed to chop onions. "Roz, I order you to take the night off," Mr. Sharif laughed. "The kids and I want to cook. We enjoy it." More vegetables were chopped, skillets started sizzling, delicious aromas swirled together, and before long a magnificent meal was set on the dinner table. Oscar positioned himself below to catch food scraps, and everybody else took a seat. Mr. Sharif turned to his daughter. "Would you like to say grace?" The girl lowered her head. "Thank you, God, for this yummy food that we're about to gobble down. Amen." "Thank you, Jaya," said Mr. Sharif with a wink. "And thank you, Roz, for everything you've done this past year. I had my doubts, but now I can't imagine what we would do without you." The children looked at each other. Then the family grabbed their knives and forks and dug into dinner. A colorful leafy salad, a plate of sautéed asparagus, creamy mashed potatoes, and buttered bread and tall glasses of milk. The meal was beautiful. But as Roz scanned the table, her eyes kept returning to the roasted chicken. It was about the size of Bright Bill, and suddenly the robot was full of questions. Do chickens lead happy lives? Did this chicken know it would be eaten? Were humans bad for eating animals? No, thought Roz. Humans are simply following their instincts, like all creatures, like Roz herself. At least the Sharifs honored this animal by giving thanks and by turning it into a beautiful, nourishing meal. After he'd finished eating, Mr. Sharif stepped out of the room and returned a moment later carrying a violin and a bow. "Growing up, I dreamed of being a musician," he said, thumping back into his chair. He tuned the instrument, put it under his chin, and started to play. His bow glided back and forth, his fingers danced across the strings, and a lovely old folk song filled the room. Mr. Sharif tapped his foot as the notes rang out, soft and then loud, slow and then fast, and the song ended with a flourish and the music faded to silence. And then he rested the violin on his knee. "This instrument has been in our family a very long time," he said, "since the days when Cyrus Sharif first built the farm." Cyrus Sharif. Roz knew that name. She unsnapped a pocket on her tool belt and pulled out the small journal. "I discovered this in the old barn," she said, handing it over. The children huddled around their father as he took the journal. They read their ancestor's name on the cover. Then they carefully opened it and turned the brittle pages. "I've never seen this journal before," said Mr. Sharif. "It's a piece of our family history. Kids, look how they used to milk the cows." And Roz left the Sharifs like that, examining the journal, learning about their family's history. But what about their family's future? Their lives were difficult, and they needed help, and Roz was about to run away forever. And as she marched to the barn back to the barn that night, the robot felt something like worry and confusion and guilt. Chapter 48. The Return. The robot's feelings of worry and confusion and guilt went away as soon as she heard her son's voice echoing across the farm. "Ma, we're back!" Bright Bill's flock appeared above the pasture, flapping and honking and laughing, and they glided down to Roz, and Bright Bill took his place on his mother's shoulder. "I told you we'd keep your son out of trouble," squawked Loudwing. "Thank you, everyone," the robot spoke in her most cheerful voice. "It is so good to see all of you again." The cows trotted over, grinning and happily mooing to the geese. While the herd and the flock caught up with each other, Roz and Bright Bill slipped away to speak privately. "So what's the plan, Ma?" said Bright Bill. "The plan is simple," said Roz. "Tonight, under the cover of darkness, I will run away from this farm, and then you and I will begin our journey home." Chapter 49. The Goodbyes. That evening was full of sad goodbyes. The first goodbye was between the flock and their young leader. The other geese wanted to help Roz and Bright Bill get home, but the journey would be dangerous, and Bright Bill refused to put his flock at risk. He demanded that they return to the island without him. The geese could feel their instincts urging them onward, and they knew Roz and Bright Bill would look after each other. So they said their goodbyes and took off into the night sky. The next goodbye was between the robot and the cows. Roz marched into the pasture one last time as the herd gathered around. "I guess this is it," said the robot. "I thank you all for being so kind to me." Annabelle sniffed and said, "I really hate goodbyes, but I'm glad you're getting to go home where you belong. I just wish there was some way I could be helpful." "Actually, there is something you can do." Roz unsnapped a pocket of her tool belt and took out the transmitter. "You can hold on to this for me. Hopefully it will take a few days for Mr. Sharif to realize that I am gone." Annabelle smiled as the robot gently tucked the small device under her collar. Lily and the other calves suddenly swarmed around Roz and nuzzled her legs. They all had tears in their eyes. Tess wanted to lighten the mood, but she couldn't think of anything funny to say. The other cows called out to their friend. "We'll miss you, Roz. Get home safely. Don't forget about us." Roz waved to the herd. She said a silent goodbye to all the farm machines parked in the shed, and then she followed the driveway out to the fields with Bright Bill on her shoulder and the children at her side. The last goodbye was the hardest of all. Everyone was quiet as they walked through the silvery moonlight, past rows and rows of sprouting crops, and out to the farthest corner of the farthest field. Roz turned and faced Jaya and Jad. She looked past them and back to the distant lights of the farm buildings. "I have prepared the farm for my departure," said Roz. "It will take care of itself for a while, but not forever." "We can manage things, at least till we get another robot," said Jad. "This place won't be the same without you, but we'll be okay." "What will you tell your father?" said Roz. "Well, that's for us to worry about," said Jaya. "You just worry about getting home." Roz glanced down at the tool belt strapped across her chest. "Would you like this back?" "No, we would not," said Jad. "This is a gift for you," said Jaya. The girl pulled her brother and her robot into a big, tight hug, and beneath the sounds of the crickets were the sounds of the children crying. How will we know that you made it home?" said Jad. "Yeah, we need to know how your story ends," said Jaya. The robot muttered some animal words to her son and then said to the children, "If a goose ever visits this farm and presents you with a feather, you will know that I am home." The children smiled through their tears and waited for their friends to leave. But the robot didn't move. More than anything, Roz wanted to go home. And yet, she was conflicted. She cared about this family and about this farm, and now she was abandoning them. The robot lurched forward and then backward and again as her computer brain struggled with all these thoughts and feelings. Finally, the children gave her the gentle push that she needed. "Roz, we order you to run away." And the robot did as she was told. And that's where we'll stop today.